me. We are on verse number 6, commentary by Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj. The title of the topic today is The Path of Deceit. Narottam Das Thakur calls such actions asat kriya, or actions based on a false concepts of life. A person does such trifles and becomes accustomed to behaving in this way. When we begin rendering devotional service and we start behaving in the above ways out of habit, then small sins or innocent trifles turn into offenses. Narottam Das Thakur says, Dehena kariha asta. Do not trust your body and your mind because you will be cheating out of habit. When you project your bodily concept onto the spiritual realm, you will start committing offenses. If we have this tendency to deceive, we will end up deceiving not only ourselves, but we will deceive our spiritual master and the Vaishnavas. And in this way, we will be committing offenses. These 6 verse of the Manaha Siksha is about how dangerous it is to commit offenses on the spiritual path. These offenses burn us from within and deprive us of the opportunity to attain a true spiritual experience. The word kapata that Raghunath Das Goswami uses here has numerous meanings. The words that define kapat include deception, cunning, hypocrisy, shyness, fraud, trickery, evasion, self-justification, and eventually godlessness and sin. Srila Jiva Goswami gives a very important definition of deception on the spiritual path. In his Bhakti Sandarbha, he explained that deception on the spiritual path is that outwardly we bow down before our Guru, the sadhus, Vaishnava, and even to the God, while internally we do not have faith in them. So Raghunath Das Goswami says that kapat, the absence of faith in the Vaishnavas, in the sadhus, in spiritual master, and ultimately in Krishna, gives rise to kutinati. Kutinati is hypocritical activities, absorption in extraneous matters, spiteful talk, cruelty, and ultimately violence. These all start with the fact that inside I do not have complete sincerity or absolute unconditional faith. And I justify myself in every possible way. Such a mood manifests itself in the fact that I start focusing on something extraneous, such as watching TV or movies, and start thinking, I need this for my preaching so that I can preach in a more efficient way. I'll tell them about this movie in the class. Then we engage in spiteful talk, and then into cruelty, and ultimately into violence. Srila Prabhupada sometimes translates kutinati as spiteful talk. In fact, it is a very sad chain. The Acharyas explains that the first manifestation of deception is that our attitude toward the spiritual masters becomes like one we have toward common people. Deception starts saying, what's so special about the Guru? Satsvarup Maharaj tells an amazing story. In the beginning, when Srila Prabhupada has just started spreading Krishna consciousness in New York, and his first disciple joined him, they arranged a public program for Srila Prabhupada. Among them was Rayaram, one of the first disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Rayaram printed poster which he stuck all over the east side in Manhattan, where they had their preaching activities. The poster read, quote, "This man has changed the consciousness of the world," unquote. At that time, Srila Prabhupada was away. So when he came back to New York after some time, Rai Ram proudly showed him the poster. Srila Prabhupada made a grimace and said, quote, "It is a very poor poster," unquote. At first, Satsvarup Maharaj did not understand why Srila Prabhupada did not like it. Then Prabhupada said, quote, "Guru cannot be called a man," unquote. First, we pull down the Guru to a level closer to our own. This is what hypocrisy or deception is about. Then we give our mind the opportunity or the license to focus on extraneous things. As a result of this, people start to speak ill of each other. Sometimes people tell me that when they belong to other societies, people do not talk so badly about each other. But here, devotees are always backbiting. This terrible behavior leads to the beginning of cunning in our life and deception. This is a sad situation because sometimes when we are careless in our spiritual practice, instead of purifying our heart, the spiritual practice starts reinforcing the problems found there. In world history, religious people committed so much evil and cruelty for the same reason, because they were not attentive to themselves and did not catch themselves cheating in time. The sequence of events is very important. We have a slight tendency to deceptions. It gradually starts growing until it finally turns into a demon. This demon can completely devour us. Therefore, the main quality of a devotee is frankness, simplicity, and absence of hypocrisy. So tomorrow Maharaj will be dwelling and giving more detail on simplicity and determination. So please look forward for that wonderful talk. Now we will be dwelling in the life of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, volume number 3, chapter title as India Revisited, part number 2. I will read the last paragraph that we read yesterday to bring up to the speed, and then we will continue. Prabhupada was annoyed. This supposedly educated man was so ignorant as to mistake Krishna consciousness for merely another sectarian religion. Prabhupada wanted intelligent men to try to understand Krishna consciousness and understand that the Gita was actual knowledge, transcendental knowledge, beyond the inferior knowledge of the senses and the mind. But he had his plane to catch. Japan would have to wait. That's where we left. So we continue. The passengers and flight crew saw Prabhupada as an elderly Indian man dressed in saffron robes. The stewardesses weren't sure at first whether he spoke English, but when he asked them for fruits, they saw that he could and that he was a kind gentleman. He was quiet, putting on his glasses and reading from an old book of Indian scripture for hours at a time, or moving his lips in prayer while fingering Indian prayer beads in a cloth pouch, or sometime resting beneath a blanket, his eyes shut. No one knew or bothered to inquire into what he was doing. They didn't know that anxious young hearers were awaiting him in San Francisco, or that the Macmillan Company in New York wanted to publish his English translations of Bhagavad Gita, or that he had spiritual center in two countries with plans for expansions all over the world. Prabhupada sat patiently, chanting often, his hand in his bead bag, depending on Krishna as the hours passed. After a 10-hour flight, the plane landed in San Francisco, standing with hundreds of other passengers. Prabhupada gradually made his way to the exit. Down the long attached tunnel, even before he reached the terminal building, he could see Govinda Dasi and a few other disciples smiling and waving on the other side of a glass partition. As he entered the terminal building, he moved toward the glass, and his disciples dropped to their knees, offering obeisances. As they raised their head, he smiled and continued walking down the corridor while they walked alongside, only the glass partition separating them. Then they disappeared from his view as he walked down the stairwell toward immigration and customs. The downstairs area was also glassed in, and Prabhupada could see more than 50 devotees and friends waiting eagerly. As they again caught sight of him, they cried out as a group, Hare Krishna. Swamiji looked wonderful to them, 10 from his 6 month in India, younger and more sprightly. He smiled and triumphantly held up his hand in greetings. Devotees were crying in happiness. As Prabhupada stood in line at the custom inspection point, he could hear the devotees' kirtan. The glass walls only partially masking the sound. The custom official ignored the chanting, although the connection between the saffron robe passenger and the joyful chanters was not hard to see. Srila Prabhupada waited in line, glancing now and then at his chanting disciples. Since he had already sent ahead the 800 books and several crates of musical instruments, he had only one suitcase to place on the table before the inspector. Methodically, The inspector went through the contents: cotton saris for the girls, silk garlands for the Jagannath deities, kartals, saffron dhotis and kurtas, a coconut grater, and a little bottles of Ayurvedic medicine. What are these? The inspector probed. The little bottles look strange, and he called for another inspector. A delay. Swamiji's disciple became perturbed by the pity-minded customs inspectors poking through Swamiji's things, now opening the tightly corked bottles, sniffing and checking the contents. The inspector seems satisfied. Prabhupada tried to close his suitcase, but he couldn't work the zipper. Another delay. The devotee, still anxiously chanting, watched as Swamiji, with the help of a gentleman behind him, managed to zip his suitcase close. Swamiji walked toward the glass doors. The devotees began chanting madly. As he stepped through the door, a devotee blew a conch shell that resounded loudly throughout the hall. Devotee garlanded him, and everyone praised him, handing him flowers. He entered the mist as a beloved father entered the reciprocates, the embrace of his loving children. I have to grab the volume number 4, so just bear with me. So it took a little longer. So we will be embarking on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, volume number 4. Forward, preface, and introduction also we should read. So we will read the forward today. Though I have been a student of Krishna devotional traditions in India for 15 years, in the late 60s, I was influenced by then the common notion among academicians, not to mention the general public, that the movement begun by Bhaktivedanta Swami was simply another watered-down product of an Indian guru's attempt to make Hindu teaching attractive to the Western youth. The anti-cult campaign of the mid-17th highlighted ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, as one of the spurious cults. However, my research into the validity of such attitude led me to conclude that the Krishna movement in America was more authentically Indian than I had first imagined. When the opportunity presented itself in 1980 for me to live in Krishna Temple in California for 3 weeks, I began an intensive study of ISKCON that has since taken me to 14 temples throughout America and India. Through living in the temple and speaking at length with ISKCON leaders and devotees, I have come to regard many members of the movement as good friends and their guru, Bhaktivedanta Swami, as a man worthy of their attention and acclaim these biographical series efforts. In this volume of Bhaktivedanta Swami's biography, one of the central lessons taught the astute reader is the complexity and depth of the guru-disciple relationship. Much of the criticism from parents and anti-cult groups center on the authoritarian demand of cult leaders for absolute submission from their followers. It is assumed that the leader has personal motives, in parentheses, as for example, power or monetary gain, parentheses over, that drive him to control others, while the surrendered disciples are manipulated in an unthinking state by the capricious whim of the spiritual master. In this volume of the life of Bhaktivedanta Swami, we see the foolishness of such an analysis. What springs from pages after pages is the willing devotion of a young man and a woman to a man whom they admire for his deep faith and humility, not his autocratic or forceful demands. Early in ISKCON's life in America, the very fabric of this fledgling institution was threatened by schematic teachings of newly ordained ascetics on the relative place of the Guru in the life of faith and in the institution. Bhaktivedanta Swami had to state forcefully the Indian tradition that the Guru's position is absolute, that the eternal spiritual father, not simply one of convenience, to be overshadowed by time. Yet we can see why some of the young devotees were confused as Bhaktivedanta Swami prostrated himself before the image of Krishna and of his Guru in the line of spiritual teachers before him. Such, however, is the character of Parampara or Guru succession. One's Guru is the only channel through which one's devotion is transmitted faithfully to God. And such is also the case for one's Guru. In parentheses, though some, like Bhaktivedanta Swami, seem also to have direct access as well, parentheses over. Thus, to a mother who exclaimed, quote, "You know, these boys actually worship you," unquote. Bhakti Vedanta Swami respond, "Yes, that is our system. I'm also worshipping my Guru Maharaj." Haribol. This volume of Bhaktivedanta Swami's biography revealed the religious dimensions of the guru-disciple relationship in the varied attempts this remarkable Vaishnava ascetic made to nurture the deepening faith of his new American children in a God and in a spiritual tradition foreign to their native soil. From loosely performed rituals to standardized pujas, deity worship, done according to the classic Bengali texts, we see the old master encourage greater attention to the details of worship, from spontaneous but uninformed attempt to celebrate their Guru's birthday, to formal Vyas pujas set in traditional Bengali songs and prayer. Bhaktivedanta Swami's disciples are led into old Indian traditions of honoring one spiritual master as the part of the act of worshipping God. But what struck me as I read the pages that follow is the model of piety set by Bhaktivedanta Swami himself as he became deeply immersed in the praises of God while singing or chanting or dancing. It becomes quite clear that the lesson of the master is not merely what he says, but what he does. And it is also clear that the follower of the Bhaktivedanta Swami struggle, not always successfully, to match up to the high standard of the living and devotion the mature Bhaktivedanta Swami set. The reader will marvel at the persistence, ingenuity, and faithfulness to Bhaktivedanta Swami's vision, his disciples, evidence in their attempt to spread Krishna consciousness to every town and village. From the married couples who pioneered the movement in England and accomplished with the aid of the Beatles, Harrison and Lennon, what renowned sages from India before them could not, to the disciples who endured the worst that India's climate and cuisine could produce, to work long days and nights, bringing faith in Krishna back to India's own people. The contagious devotion of the masters lives on in his spiritual children. Thus, the success of ISKCON in these formative years, 1969 through 71, can be understood only when both partner in the guru-disciple relationship are given due attention. Nonetheless, it is Bhaktivedanta Swami, with his deep faith, energetic preaching, and persistent ideals, who forms the nucleus of the fledgling community of faith we observe in early years of ISKCON. What begins to happen before the careful reader's eye in this volume is the institutionalization or routinization of ISKCON's dress, ritual behavior, and administrative structure. With the formation of the Governing Body Commission (GBC) to run the practical affairs of the institutions, parenthesis, book publication, temple economics, etc. Bhaktivedanta Swami accomplished something his own master has envisioned but had not accomplished before his death, namely, to provide an administrative structure that could hold together disparate temples in varied locations with their separate leaderships. It is clear after Bhaktivedanta Swami's death in 1977 that the GBC has enabled ISKCON to weather storm from within, in parentheses, including the defection of one of Bhaktivedanta Swami's 11 appointed successors, parenthesis over, and from without, in parentheses again, X for example, tax and legal challenges to the ISKCON's religious status in California, parenthesis over. That would have been impossible without central leadership. We see in this volume the beginning of that leadership core and the freedom from administrative detail the GBC afforded Bhaktivedanta Swami. Having introduced Sarvdas Goswami and visited a farm under his management, I have seen the same devotion expressed for him by his disciple that he expresses here for Bhaktivedanta Swami. That is not surprising when one realizes that even with effective institutional structures like the GBC in place, communities of faith remain vital only so long as there are living models to give expression to ideals and beliefs that can otherwise seem quite remote. Critics of ISKCON, who see only the outward trappings of surrender to the Guru, miss the humility before God and Guru that is demanded of each Guru as well. This volume is a success not because of some academic standard of objectivity, in parentheses, which few biographers meet in any case, parenthesis over, but because of the skillful blend of oral history, documented reminiscence, and transparent admiration, of all of which bring Bhaktivedanta Swami to life for the reader as a real and exceptional person. We not only sense but observe that it is complete devotion to God through the person of one's spiritual master that animated ISKCON in its early years and continues to do so now, as evidenced by the author himself. Thus, this book reads like a personal yet precise diary relating the formative years of ISKCON and its founder teacher. And just as in reading a diary, we learn as much as from reading between the lines as we do from the events and persons described. This is fascinating chronicle. I urge you to read. Dr. Larry Sinn, Danforth Professor of Religion of Lyon College, Oberlin, Ohio. So I think we should stop here at perfect time. We will start from preface and then introduction to this volume. Very nice Guru-disciple relationship. Very important topic in spiritual practices. So looking forward for that. And before the devotee leave, we would like to offer them our humble obeisances at the desk of their feet. Vanchakalpatarubhasya kripasindubhayavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much for joining every morning. If anybody has any question, comment, correction, or chastisement before we end our session,